You guys know I use some pretty expensive coloring pencils for my portraits, and I always get comments like, what about Crayola? What about Crayola? So today I got myself some Crayola and we'll be comparing them to the super expensive, luxurious Caran D'ache Luminance set. So grab a drink and let's go. Hey people, my name is Temi if you're new here. And firstly, I'd like to shout out the great Jazza and Super Ray Dizzle have done similar videos in the past. So I'll link those videos down in the description box. I wanted to do my take on it doing a portrait piece. To make the comparison fair, I'll pick 24 of the Caran d'Ache pencils that are most similar to the Crayola set. I'll compare the prices, I'll swatch both sets and see how well they perform with a series of blending tests. And then I'll attempt the drawing you saw in the thumbnail using these pencils. The video will be broken down into chapters and there are timestamps in the description box if you'd like to jump around. So for price, we've got the Crayola set of 24, which retails for around $7, which is 30 cents per pencil. And then we've got the Caran d'Ache Luminance set. I've got the set of 76 colors and that retails for around $337. They also sell a set of 20 pencils which retails for $82, so I'll use that for the comparison, which comes to $3.41 per pencil. So I've quickly swatched them side by side. Can you guess which is Crayola and can you guess which is Caran d'Ache? So pause the video quickly and leave a comment and I'll tell you if you're right. So as you can see from the swatches, there isn't much difference, and firstly, shout out to me for the color match because I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty similar. But if you guessed the left side is Crayola, then you were right. I've just added the color names and color numbers for each. And as you can see from a close-up, they look very similar. You can probably slightly tell that the Caran d'Ache side is a little more vibrant, but honestly, you can't really see much of a difference. One thing I did notice is Crayola has a harder tip, so it almost sharpened to a sharper point. It has like a thinner lead. And also, this is kind of a by the way, and it's definitely not that deep, but Crayola only gives you a color option. So for example, this is violet, and in comparison, Caran d'Ache has the name and the number. So on my swatch sheet, I only put the number down for the Caran d'Ache side. So if you're familiar with my normal work, you know that I barely draw on white paper. So I've decided to do some swatches on grey paper as well. This is the Arteza grey tone paper. All the supplies I used are linked in the description box. Now, doing these swatches is where I saw the biggest difference. The Arteza paper is so smooth that the Crayolas did not perform at all. The previous paper I used had a textured surface, which I think aided Crayola, but on this smooth paper, you can see that the Caran d'Ache side looks so much more vibrant. There were a couple of colors that I messed up on my swatch sheet. For example, the magenta color I accidentally swapped and the blue color, but I'm sure it's very clear to see the difference in quality of the pencils just on this smooth paper. My conclusion with this swatch test is that Crayola will perform better on some sort of textured paper and potentially white paper in comparison to a smooth grey paper. And looking at them side by side, it's clear to see that the Crayola just seems to look better on this white paper. So that's the paper I'll continue with for the rest of this video. Now I'm going to do a series of tests just to see how well these perform. First, I've got the opacity test, and the purpose is just to layer the pencils and see how well they get to an opaque point. From the Crayola side, you can see that it forms a really nice single color blend and it gets to a pretty nice point as well. For Caran d'Ache, it was already so saturated, the color goes down so saturated, so even as I was trying to be very faint towards the end, it was very hard. But because of that, it was easier to get to the darkest point and it was easier to layer the pencils. But the thick pencil lead made it hard to get to a lighter point. So this point goes to Crayola. Next, I've got a complementary color blend, so I'm just going to do a quick yellow to red blend using a series of oranges, as you can see on the screen. The blend technique I'm using here is just layering. I'm not going to talk through the technique in this video. I've got a whole video on that, so I'll link that down in the description box. So if you're interested in learning how to layer, check out that video after you watch this one. But with this one, I was pleasantly surprised with Crayola. You can see that the colors are very vibrant and they blend quite seamlessly. I was shook. So as I said, I didn't use any additional tools to help with this blend, and see how seamless the blend came out. Now for the Caran d'Ache side, it was quicker. There's just something about the Caran d'Ache pencils that just made it a quicker, easier process. Of course, I've been using Caran d'Ache pencils for years, so I'm very familiar with how to blend them, but the pencils really just feel like butter. It just went down so smoothly and so quickly. One problem is that it almost has lead shaving slash debris that builds up, and I don't know what the word for that is, but I had to constantly blow that off. And you can also tell that the edges of the rectangle weren't as clean as the Crayola, and that's because of the thick lead that the Caran D'ache pencils have. So just comparing them, the point definitely goes to Caran D'ache. The process was just so much easier, the colors came out more vibrant, it just made a much more opaque, smooth blend. Next, I've got a non-complementary color blend. The idea for this is to blend two colors that don't have a seamless and nice transitionary color. I'm blending three colors, a light green, a darker green, and the pink. So for this one, I just tried the layering technique again, and I just tried to go in sections to try to ease the blend. But the Crayola ended up looking kind of muddy in the middle. The middle just came to this brown point, which I guess was the point of the blend. It wasn't meant to have a nice transitionary color, but I think the blend could have been nicer, especially at the point where it gets to the pink. It's just kind of sudden. The Caran D'ache on the other side made, of course, a nicer blend. Like, that shouldn't shock anyone at this point. The Caran D'ache blends like butter. So the colors combine really well. That's something I've noticed about Caran D'ache. They layer seamlessly and they combine so beautifully. It almost looks like a navy blue kind of color was used in the middle for the blend. And as you can see on the left, it's like a brown muddy color, but on the right, it's just a nice seamless transition. And again, it was using the same three colors. With this one, it's very clear to see which the superior pencil is. So the point goes to Caran D'ache. Next, I'm doing a burnish test. So a lot of people like to blend using burnishes or blenders. So I'm using the Derwent blender for this one. If you're familiar with my channel, you know I absolutely hate using blending aids. I just think they just come out looking ashy and ugly. So I'm going to do a complementary color blend, just going from a pink to purple. And I'm trying to layer it as much as possible before I use the colors. Now for this one, honestly, I'm so disappointed. It just leaves this really ashy tone. I honestly feel like blenders are the laziest way to blend, in my opinion. And I tried to layer back over it with the pencils, and of course it didn't layer. So very disappointed with this blend. On the Caran D'ache side, it's slightly better, but still an ugly blend. Honestly, guys, do not waste your money on burnishes. And finally, I'm doing a solvent test. So I don't normally use solvents in my personal work, so I don't have any, and I ordered some, but after waiting 2 weeks, it's still not here. So I'm trying to use this nail polish I have around my house. I saw a video by Kirsty Partridge where she tried household items for blending, and the nail polish was what worked the best. So I just thought, let me try that. For this one, I'm doing a blue to green blend, and I've got the three colors you can see on the side. I'm trying to put enough pigment down so that it can stick to something, and I put the nail polish in the lid, and honestly, I just feel like it's a waste of my time. To be fair, I'm not trying to judge it too hard because realistically, I could get very different results using a normal solvent. But because I don't have any, this is all I've got to test, and this was trash. And the Caran D'ache, honestly, it was the exact same thing. The points go to nobody for the last two tests, by the way. The final test I'm doing, and I said final before, but the final is a layering test with white pencils and nothing really showed up. And then with a white pen, and the white pen showed up well over it for both brands. Finally, I tried to layer coloring pencils over the white pen for both. Neither of them worked well, they just kind of chipped at the pen. And that's the end of the blend test. Now let's try a half and half realistic drawing. So I've sketched out this eye on a separate piece of paper. This is just normal printer paper that I use for the sketch. And I don't like to sketch on my sketchbooks directly because I don't like to erase directly on my sketchbook. The sketch part of a process is always a trial and error process. So I like to do that on a separate piece of paper. I shade the back of the paper using a 4B pencil, and then I transfer the sketch using a biro. I used a kneaded eraser to just lighten the sketch so that I don't have too many problems with the sketch showing through on the drawing. Now I've got my Crayola pencils and I'm just starting with the pupil of the eye. And I can see already that I can get to a really dark point with the black, which is fantastic. I decided to do an eye drawing for this test because of the limited color range from the Crayola. The pack of 20 has a pretty good color range, to be fair, but with my normal skin tone colors that I do a lot of dark skin, and they literally had 2 browns in the set. So I just thought I'd just pick an eye drawing which would have enough colors in the one piece. From my blending test, I found that the best way to blend these pencils is just by layering. So I'm working in very light layers, not worrying too much about the white that I can see through the page, but just trying to put the colors down and trying to mix the colors. With realism, a lot of people struggle because if they don't see the color they're looking for in the particular pencil, they just think, oh my gosh, I can't do it. But you can actually mix color and pencils just like you can mix paints to make your color. So with that, you can put down an orange and then put down bits of red, bits of green to change the tone of the color, and then you can achieve the color you're actually going for. So now I'm going in with a black pen. I'm using the Faber-Castell black pen and the Staedtler fine liner for the eyelashes mainly, but also to go over the darkest points of the drawing. Drawings like this deserve as much contrast as they can get, and the black Crayola pencil does give me nice contrast, but for all my drawings, it's usually kind of mixed media, so I'm also going to use a black marker to aid the process. I also did the shine parts of the drawing using a white pen, the Sakura Jelly Roll. And that's it for the Crayola side. I'm pleasantly surprised with what I can get with it, especially with just the layering technique for blending. And now for the Caran D'ache side. So again, just going through with the same kind of colors. Of course, this eye isn't symmetrical, so I'm not actively testing out the same exact thing on both sides, but it's the same exact technique with the layering, trying to make the colors that I can see in the reference. So the first layer is this very faint layer where you can still see whites through, but the more I build up the colors, the more opaque it gets. And it's clear to see where the Caran D'ache is a little bit more superior, because when I'm blending out the colors, it just makes a much more seamless blend, but especially in the green areas. So if you compare that directly to the Caran D'ache side, and I did the exact same thing for the eyelash reflections in the eye, just using the marker pens for those. The white Crayola pencil also aids with the blending for this section. I add the reflections on this side, also using the same white pen, and I'm pleasantly surprised as an overall with how the pupil came out, because I think Crayola really held its own for this part of the drawing. And of course, I've got a line of demarcation in the middle, but I tried to mimic the technique so that you wouldn't be able to tell that I'm using two different materials, two very different materials. Now for the whites of the eye. So I'm sure you know already the whites of the eye aren't complete white. There's some reds, there's some yellows, there's some greys that really come in with the shadows, and of course you've got the veiny areas of the eye. My challenge with this side was trying to keep it light, and I tried to put a layer of the white pencil first and then go over it to lighten things, but that white pencil from Crayola is absolutely trash. Did not do a damn thing. I had to go in very, very light layers so that everything still made sense. I used purples for some of the shadows, and I added some blues, and then the regular reds, yellows, and oranges to make it look good. Again, the blending on this side was kind of hard to do just by the layering technique, but I think because I'm drawing on white paper, it wasn't too difficult to try to blend into white. And I just want to show you this in real time to show how light and how slowly I'm working. I think a lot of these pieces, it just comes down to patience more than anything else. If you're rushing the piece, of course it's not going to come out as good, but if you can be patient with it, then I'm sure regardless of the art supplies you use, you can come out with a good enough piece. With the Crayola side, it's not as blended as it could be. However, I think it's still a nice enough effect for this drawing. And now onto the Caran D'ache side. So I had the exact same issue with drawing on white. And again, I tried to do a layer of whites, but I don't really think it helps that much. So my focus was more working in very light layers to try to give an illusion where the shadows come in. The good thing about this side of the drawing was that there were a lot of shadows and a lot of grays. Now the problem is I'm only using a pretty dark gray for this piece. So my biggest problem came more with limitations of the color range rather than the actual supplies that I was using. So I had to go very faintly with the super pigmented dark gray that I had with this limited color range. And then I tried to go over it with the white pencil to try to lighten it up and try to layer it. Also, with this kind of drawing, you want to think about the drawing in layers. So you'll see some of the reflections that I put in towards the end. So I approached it by leaving some gaps, but also knowing that I will come back in with a white pen for the sharpest highlights. After I got down what I thought was a good enough grey, then I started to add some of the veins into the eye just to add to the realism. So I used a brown colouring pencil for that. I used some red pencils as well and some of the grey as well. So again, for the eyelashes, I use markers for that. And overall, at this point of the drawing, I'm very pleased with both materials. I think it's very clear to see that the Caran D'ache side is just an easier material to use. And that's probably what you're paying for. Along with everything else, that's what you're paying for. You're paying for ease of use and material. With the Crayola side, I felt like I had to be firefighting. I felt like I really had to struggle. Now adding the white highlights, and this is what really brings the piece together, because the sharpest reflections and the sharpest highlights is what just adds to the ultimate realism of the piece. And now for the skin. I was so nervous to attempt the skin. So I gathered all the colors that I thought would be relevant. So I've got a lot of reds, oranges, yellows, and then some purples for the shadows. And I started with the purple in the crease, and even the peach color that comes with this set it's just not great, is it? So I'm just trying to layer the colors and just trying to form a nice smooth base. And that's where I faced the biggest problems with Crayola. It absolutely would not blend, absolutely would not layer. Using the white pencil to try to aid the blend was not working either. Honestly, this was a nightmare trying to do this skin. So after a bunch of layering, I realized that this is absolutely never going to blend. So I ended up using that solvent, the solvent that I mentioned earlier in the video that never arrived. It finally came. And I just used it to attempt to blend the colors. The good thing about this solvent is that even Crayola layers over this solvent, so it was fantastic. I just put it down and just tried to make a wash. While that was drying off at the top, then I did the bottom part of the drawing and again just tried to place the colors. So placing the yellows, placing the reds, placing the beige kind of color, and trying to place some white and just trying to blend it with this solvent. When the solvent had dried a bit, then I layered the piece and just went in with more colors and just tried to make something that made sense. After I got to a point that I was moderately happy with the piece, then I used the Uniball white pen for some skin textures and for some highlights in the skin. The good thing about this pen in comparison to the Sakura Jelly Roll is that it's got a bigger nib and it also dries softer. Next, I attempted to do some eyelashes using a variety of calligraphy pens. I even tried the Ohuhu brush markers at some point, and it was a hideous mess. Everything was just a hot mess. I don't even think I need to describe how much of a hot mess this is. And I've realized in the end that that was because the solvent layer hadn't dried properly. So anything I put over the top wasn't coming up very well. The markers weren't coming through as well. It was kind of drying out as I was trying to use it. It was kind of like blocking the ink from coming through when I was trying to use it. I did find that the Uniball Waterproof Eyeliner was the best one to use, but I decided in the end to leave it to dry a little bit more and then come back to fix the lashes. Adding some final colors and trying to blend out the highlights in the skin, that is where I'm leaving that side and moving on to the Caran D'ache side. So again, the Caran D'ache side, it wasn't the smoothest process for me. If you're familiar with any of my other work, you know that I use pan pastels as a base for coloring pencils, and recently I've started using markers as a base. So using neither was just kind of long, and honestly, I don't know why some coloring pencil artists don't use any base, because having to completely fill the base with a series of colors and then trying to blend, it's just long. But for the Caran D'ache side, it was a lot nicer to blend. I didn't actually use a solvent for this side at all. I just placed down the colors as I saw best, and I just went over the sections using the white pencil or the beige colored pencil, and everything blended seamlessly. Again, I used the Uniball pen to add some white, softer details into the skin. And then I attempted the bottom of the drawing. So I think at the bottom of the drawing, you can see the clear difference between the Caran D'ache and the Crayola pencils because of how seamless the Caran D'ache blends. And honestly, as I said, I didn't use any other blenders. It was just the same layering technique, but it just formed a really nice, smooth skin layer, which Caran D'ache are famous for. When I was happy enough with the skin / tired of the drawing, I just added the lashes using the Uniball pen, and this was a very quick process. I wasn't really being precious about the direction. It was just kind of to show the effect. And with lashes, if you struggle with lashes, you just want to make sure that it's thicker at the base and feathers out lighter. And that is it for this drawing. Don't forget to sign your work. And here's the final drawing. I am pleasantly surprised with how well the Crayolas worked. I never thought I'd actually be able to produce a good piece with Crayola. I never thought I'd be able to do skin textures with Crayola, but what helped on that side was using the solvent. So I would say if you're using cheaper pencils that don't blend very well, definitely try a solvent. It will help the process. But in terms of who won this comparison test, I guess it's up to you. If you're a beginner, you definitely don't need something as expensive as the Caran D'ache. There are other cheaper alternatives. In fact, I've got loads of coloring pencil brands and I'm planning on doing a whole comparison test for all of them, which might help you make a decision better. Hopefully this video shows even if you're a beginner, the Crayola has the potential to produce an amazing piece. So yeah, that's it for this video. I've got plenty of speed drawing videos on my channel. I've got drawing tutorials. So have a look at those videos. I'll link some playlists at the end of this video. And thank you so much for watching. I'll see you on my next video. Goodbye.